Okay, so this is for D1 strategy, defense 1 strategy. Okay, so playing Orisa. More or less we're going to be running a similar, if not the exact same, sort of team comp. Kind of a shield breaky thing. The only difference being that the attacking team is more likely to run a Farah. In which case we'll probably have to run a soldier instead of a Hanzo. But either way, you'll still be playing Orisa, so it's all good. So first setup, let's call this like first point, is here. Sort of thinking maybe shield placements should be something like this, so that this doorway is still blocked at the same time as you're getting value through here. But definitely, like at the very beginning, you'd want something like this, so you can get an aggressive position so that you can get pulse off. And in saying that, when you're setting up for the very first fight, you want to take away all of these handrails. The reason being that you don't have to go over this bridge, the enemy team does, and if the handrails aren't there, then it's, you know, just another border that they're screwed with. Okay, just like a brief sort of theory thing, the reason that you don't set up on the right side and you set up here is because your team's natural retreat is down this way and not this way. If you'd set up here, you have to retreat there and then you have to cross the road, which is bad. Okay, so the payload's going to be here. If the enemy team's smart, they're going to set up on this side of the payload, because they've got, well, for the tanks and such, they're going to set up on this side of the payload because they've got the payload as a shield that has infinite health. Their shields will therefore take less damage, they'll be able to push it a bit easier. But the downside of that for them is that they won't have as much opportunity to be in a safe position and get as much damage as possible off. So, you know, they're sacrificing safety for damage. If they're going for something that's a bit more aggressive, they'll set up on this side and try and damage you a lot more successfully on their part, but it also gives you an opportunity to get, like, this is where I get a whole bunch of triple kills and stuff like that, so definitely practice that. Just in terms of, like, placement, you know, if you do it, you know, if I did it there, they'd probably be able to get back on, so you need to do it, like, a little bit further off. Yeah, it's a bit harder to get these ones, purely just because the angle is a bit harder. You know, if you've got a shield up here and the payload, then you have to shoot it between the payload and here. But yeah, that's just a practice thing. So this is the first point, and the reason that this is also really good is that if you're, you know, being a bit more aggressive and you're playing here, you've got this natural cover, so that's really good. But at the same time, once you have defended that bit or they've pushed it back a certain amount, you know, say you get to here, and this is a really good shield placement because it's a round shield. It's not entirely a semicircle, but it's sort of that shape. You know, a Reinhardt is just a rectangle, but this you can utilize the different shapes of it. So put your shield here, like, yes, this blocks it, but at the same time you're blocking this entire high ground, you're blocking this entire low ground, you're blocking main, and you're blocking this flank, which is the most important bit. A lot of the time people will choose like a Reaper to go through here and just sort of irritate you and that sort of thing, but we can go over the rest of that in the video, in the, you know, the supplementary videos for the other characters. At this stage, you'd probably want like a D.Va on main, on high ground, sorry. You'd probably want your Hanzo to be here on defense, just so if he's standing here, he can get like a really good sight off, but still have this corner as a shield, and still it's able for healers to access him. So at this particular point, say the payloads come to about here. Obviously you'll need to push back. You'd need to retreat back a little bit. It's probably not the best shield placement. Something like this would probably work. And at the same time as you're doing that, it shields against here, and to some degree, that's probably not good. You want to make it so that this space, so if you've got a teammate standing here, someone playing a Widow can capitalize on that. So you want to, something like that, or here. You want it to connect, basically. That might work better. but you want to make it so that your team has like a way to retreat and still maintain beneficial positioning. So what I mean by that is, if you just sort of put your shield here and your team sort of like runs backwards, that's not really the greatest positioning. You know, once the payload pushes through to about here, you probably want your Hanzo to be stationed about here. And the reason you'd want him stationed there is that if someone tries to shoot him, which will be hard to do because he's either only got that sight line, this sight line, or people that are just sneaking around main now, he can jump off, get to the health pack, or he can jump behind, get healing, all that sort of stuff. He's still got options. You'd probably want your D.Va to still be here. And the reason I'd say D.Va is because, again, just like in the attack videos, this is extremely, this is like very much about capitalizing on high ground so that you can secure team fights. Whereas for you and, you know, the sort of squishier backline of your team, I'm leaning towards thinking you might want your Junkrat here. The reason you'd want your Junkrat here is because he can still do immense shield pressure. Say if the enemy Reinhardt is here, he's got a shield there, right? If you're playing Junkrat standing here, you can shoot, bang, ricochet off this wall and still hit his shield. Or, alternatively, if he is pushed forward a little bit more, then you can like essentially just get free damage onto the backline, and that breaks up their death ball if they've got one, or it just breaks up their positioning, which is really good. That's what you want to do as Junkrat. A thing that people that are smart will probably do is not just come in main, but they'll probably try and capitalize on pushing the payload at the same time as maybe getting a long range flank with Widow or Hanzo, or or getting someone to this high ground and putting pressure on you as the Orisa to retreat more. And that's perfectly fine. You can retreat more for sure. What you want to do is notice parts where your teammates have used their positioning to make the enemy team a bit less secure in their position, in which case you can probably push forward a little bit more. You know, if you're winning the shield war because your Junkrat's doing work, your Hanzo's doing work, your Zen's doing work, everyone's like, and even you know, you've got 150 ammo and you do quite a bit of damage to shields, if not most shield damage in the game, because, or at least when I'm playing Orisa, I tend to use her as a shield break, and then I also use her to try and whittle down tanks as much as possible, because you want to get those bongos up as quick as you possibly can. So if you're winning the shield war, you know, by all means, push it forward a little bit more, and you can still have that pressure from your Hanzo, your D.Va, your Junkrat. And the perk of having you here, one here, one here, one here, is that your Zen can be here or maybe in this sort of spot. And you can keep fighting on the payload. He can be there to assist you. Yeah, this is a good spot for him, I would say, because he can retreat, and it's pretty hard for their flankers to hit him. And so you've got your Hanzo nearby, you've got your Zen, Hanzo, Junk, D.Va, you, and then Mercy will sort of be doing her thing, as she always does. Once you get to about this part, defending as Orisa becomes kind of hard. You have to, like, the valid corners for this particular part in terms of shield placement and where to set up your sort of counter push is here, because you've got this corner, you've got this sort of defense, you can stand here, get damage in. You don't want to really do anything on this side, because if you're standing here, they've still got payload. You want to be in the way of the payload. So here is another good spot. You know, you've got these boxes that are doing enough shielding for you. Like, they'll be able to get like some small sight lines off, but not really that much. And you're still covering this flank, which is kind of what you want. Your Hanzo will also be covering this flank and making it harder for their flankers to do anything, sorry, because he's also got sight lines through to this courtyard. So if there are flankers, you know, say if there's an enemy Genji coming up here, Hanzo's going to be standing there, so he's going to be able to do some scouting of the flanks and see, and try and contest that and shut them down as much as possible. Or if not, to scout it, provide information for where the enemy team is, and that's what you want. So this is also a valid shield position, or yeah, this is better because shielding from potential sites here, main, and from this flank. You'd have to be a bit careful. You know, your team would have to sort of retreat like this, not so much like this. Would also work if you just do a quick and then you can walk back along, but there's also this. So it might be better for your team to, if you as Orisa are walking back along the payload, trying to contest it as much as possible, trying to draw aggro as much as possible, you know, you've still got Fortify and all that sort of stuff, which you would preferably use when you're above 50%, because if you have the combined damage stat from Fortify, which is 50% reduction, plus the, I've forgotten what the damage reduction is on armor, but if you use that in tandem with each other, then it means that you take a whole lot less damage, which is really what you want to do. Is that shield good? No, not really. You want to shield that. Like, you don't need to shield this spot. It's kind of useless, right? You know? So this is good. And if they're trying to capitalize the bit that's hard for you right now as a team, say the payload gets to about here, and you're trying to fend them off. At this point, the smart thing for them to do would be to sort of spread out a little bit. They'll be able to try and capitalize on these high grounds, and if they're being a bit more aggressive, they'll try and capitalize on this high ground as well. And the reason that that's particularly good is that it makes this area contested, visually speaking. You know, they've got sightlines into here, so you can't particularly, as a Zen or Hanzo or whatever, fight from in here, because if you, as soon as you cross here, there's a sightline. Discord notifications. Okay, so like obviously this corner would be the next one, and you've still got, you know, a sightline here, but it doesn't matter as much. And the reason I say that is because your team can just stand here or stand here, and you have clear scouting as to, you know, this particular area. Say if they're running like a really mobile Rhine comp, you know, it like Orisa tends to, at least if I'm ever playing her, Orisa gets really easily shut down by Reinhardt, the speed booster by Lucio, in which case you have to rely on the positioning of your team and literally run back. When any character, apart from Tracer and Genji who run a bit faster, when characters are running forward, they run at 5.5 meters per second. When they're running backwards, they're running at 5 meters a second. So if you're shooting as well, like have a look at this. So this is me running at 5.5, and that's like roughly half the speed. So a lot of the time you'll want to sacrifice the shield damage or whatever that you do, especially against an aggressive Reinhardt, because he'll be swinging anyway. It doesn't make a difference. Your damage does nothing at that point. So you know, you want to put your shield up so that you can retreat back and still shield yourself. And at this particular point, when you're defending here, you'll want probably a DPS in here so that they can set up a bit of a crossfire. And you'll want some people, I would say, here as well. And the reason for this is that you can have this crossfire from people in here shooting across. You can have your Orisa here contesting payload. Say if there's like, you know, 0.1 meters left, then you can contest the payload through here. And then you've got people that are visually shutting down flanks and the high grounds. You might want to have your D.Va up here, so if you can recontest, your D.Va can get on this high ground, start shooting down, and you can push out again. And that way your healers can have access to her and access to everyone on the team. Okay, so say they've capped the next point. What's the next best spot to hold? I've always found that standing here is sort of like a sitting ducks position. As Orisa, contesting this particular spot is really good. At least I've found. Might be incorrect, but I've had success when I've been sort of doing my thing here. And the reason for that is that this is an immortal shield. So unlike any other handrail in the game, this is there permanently. So you can really easily defend this spot, especially if you're using bongos. And I think the counter to this is speed on the other team. If, you know, again, if the team's got a Reinhardt and a Lucio, it makes it a lot harder. But a really good thing about this is that positioning, especially if you've got a shield here, is virtually impossible to kill unless they walk through your shield and start shooting it or hitting it or whatever. Yeah, and so you can comfortably stand up here, and then for 3 seconds you can stand outside line of sight of bongos, and you can contest this part. In terms of positioning on defense for this area, you would want your Zen to be in the doorway. And the reason you'd want him to be in the doorway is so that he can still get shots off, still be able to scout where snipers are and all that sort of stuff, and he has access to a health pack. At the same time, you'll also probably want your D.Va to be on high ground, and if she's not on high ground, then you'd want her to be sort of on main with you. As Orisa, you know, you'd be here doing your thing. One thing that I found that works really well is, as Orisa, you're doing a lot of aggro, right? So you'll be sort of doing your thing, people will be coming up to you and you can just hit. Like, obviously there's a chance that the gondola could be going and they might actually get saved, but it still puts them in a bad position. And so this, as well as the bridge at point 1, just over there, is like your zone. This is like your space. This is really good for you. So here, you'd probably want to take as much aggro as possible. You know, if Reinhardt starts swinging at you, fortify, blah, 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 blah. Try and work your way around the corner, and then bang. If they're particularly smart about it, they'll take the longer route, because they'll be able to track where your ball is, and they'll have a lot more time to react and time to get away from it before they get environmental killed or EK'd. In terms of team positioning for this particular spot, I would say you'd want your Hanzo up here. In one of these high ground spots where he's further away, he can still get damage. I don't think he has damage fall off. Feel free to correct me, whoever plays Hanzo. I don't really care much for the character because I don't like playing him. But as Orisa, you'll want to be at this lamppost, and then you'll be the one that's constantly contesting payload, while you've got your Zen in cover or here. As Zen, you probably wouldn't want to like backtrack this way because you've got open sight lines and you can probably get sniped or damaged or just something like that. So you'd want to be able to that, and then, you know, put Harmony on your Orisa or whatever, walk around, and that's been 3 seconds and the Harmony doesn't go away. So that's that point, and say they push further forward. This point in particular, as Orisa, is really damn good. You know, you're forcing them to go through your shield or to go through here and get the corner on you. What you'll want to do for that is to have someone on your team. You'd probably have your Zen here, because if your Zen's here, he can still get shots off, he can still get discords, harmonies, and he can see what's going on in here. If it's entirely necessary for him, actually this spot might be better, because he can also look at the doorway and still use that column as a shield. And then moving through, you'd want probably a Junkrat. Yeah, you'd probably want your Junkrat on high ground, only because you want him to have direct line of sight for where he's shooting, because there aren't any walls, unlike attack where, you know, you don't entirely need line of sight because you can shoot the shot, rebound it off the wall, and you still get that ricochet damage. But here, there's no walls. You know, you're shooting into the water. So you want him to probably play with the team. If your team gets dived on, that's all for the better. Because you're fairly anti-dive as Orisa. You know, you've got Fortify, you've got all that sort of stuff. And Fortify is like your universal cooldown, you know. Fortify is like Tracer's Recall, it's like Genji's Dash, it's like Moira's Fade. It's that thing where as soon as you don't have it, the enemy's play style changes so that they can focus you more, in an ideal sense. A lot of the time people don't capitalize on it, but that's what they should be doing. So you've got your shield here. You might want to have someone shooting from this spot because it's probably partially shielded. Maybe if you have your shield a bit more advanced, then that's better for them, right? And then you wanna have the high ground. You want to have as much vertical space as possible, so that you can shut them down. And then here, it's also still beneficial if you can like take aggro, maybe try and divert their attention, and then get off your holds. Okay. And plus, this is also a particularly good spot for you to use bongos, because bongos will attach to this person, it'll attach to this person, probably. It'll attach to virtually everyone in your team. It's a really good value spot, and they have to walk around your shield and around the corner to shoot it. So say if they've got the next spot, this is your position. And the reason I say this is your position, having it here, yes, there's this in the way, so this will take up some of the damage because people can't aim all of the time. It also takes away this line of sight from the doorway and here. The parts that are obviously vulnerable are this spot here. People can walk through, so you'd probably want your Diva to be here, contesting that high ground. It also gives some verticality for your Mercy, and then you can have Zen doing his thing here, and he can still scout people that are going at that mega over there, and probably a Hanzo would be here as well. Or alternatively, Zen could be here, which is good because it means while he's a little bit further away from the team, he can retreat to this health pack, which isn't entirely safe. There's still a line of sight. So yes, you can use the health pack as Zen, but you'd probably want to rely on Mercy heals there. Yeah. Okay, and so say you're pushing through here, or you're defending through here while they're pushing, sorry. And they've got this high ground. You want to utilize this as much as possible. You want to have someone that's sort of stationed here peeking around so that they can see if anyone's sneaking up, if there's a Reaper or blah 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 blah, Genji, Tracer, all that sort of stuff. And I think as Orisa, at this stage, you'll probably want to utilize this position. Wait. I'd say that's a bit better. Because you're shielding from here, shielding from here, shielding from here. Importantly from here. You want to have line of sight here so that if there's like a Tracer that's sneaking up or something, or a lot of the time I use halts for recon. So if you go here and you hear that little sound it makes when it attaches to someone, you know that someone's there. So that's really useful. And then say you are fighting on the point, you sort of have to set up shop on the payload as the defender. Say they've just capped, which happens a lot of the time, they've just capped, but you've won the team fight straight after. And so you'd probably want to set up on this corner here. You can still... It is a lot harder for them to get snipes off and all that sort of stuff because your team can just go along this wall. And having this spot, you'll want to have somebody on high ground. You might want to have your Diva and Hanzo on high ground. And then you can have your Junkrat here on the low ground. Mercy and Zen can be a little bit further back, providing heals to both people. But for the most part, the perk of having Diva on this high ground here is that as Orisa, if you can scout that someone's going into this room, then Diva can fly down, start 1v1ing them, and you can put more resources into shutting down this flank. People don't use this flank as much on attack, purely because it sort of puts you a little bit out of position, makes it easy for your team to capitalize as the defenders. But say they cap this next point. You, just like on attack, you'll probably want to set up here. And this is a ridiculously good spot for you to put bongos. If they start flanking from here, you'd probably have to be like, oh, they're flanking from there, and then just change the orientation slightly. Would that still work? You probably need to put it like here. There we go, that's better. So you're not really giving up much in the way of shield space. But the aim of this is to shut down here, 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 and here. You can shut down every single flank and main, or at least have scouting on these spots as Orisa, and still be able to put up a fairly good position for your teammates. As Junkrat, he'll probably want to be positioned here, he's got access to this mega, he can shoot down this hallway. It's just like on attack, you know, these arcades are his space, and this room is his space as well. You know, he can, when he's in here, he can shoot around, bang, bang, bang. He can shoot people at main, he can, like, get all these good ricochets off. And you'd probably want your D.Va to be playing, I would say, around here. If you're shielding this spot, unless they're running a Roadhog or something, in which case she'd be out of position and she'd get hooked in, like zoop. But she could also run this spot, and this is particularly helpful as D.Va because you can distract them. Like those, even though she doesn't do much in the way of damage, she can distract them, get her little, you know, damage ticks in, all that sort of stuff, and take their attention away. Also shut down his flank. Yeah, moving on. You want to have, if you've got a long range character like a Hanzo, you probably want him to be here, trying to get off some damage, and also scouting on if they've got any flankers, which is particularly helpful because he's got a whole bunch of recon abilities. And by a whole bunch, I mean he used to have 3, but now he's only got 2, if you count an ultimate as a recon ability, which is very possible to do if you use it the correct way. Especially if we don't have a Zarya Grav to group up with it, then that makes sense. You'll want to be on this side in particular, like on the left side of the payload. And the reason for that is you want Junkrat to reclaim this space. You know, say if they're pushing forward, you want your Junkrat to claim this space as much as possible. And you still want to have your team, you want to have your squishies sort of surrounding this spot, and you want to have your Hanzo or your soldier, if it comes to that point, to be doing his thing here. If he's playing soldier and he gets his ultimate after sort of that last leg 2 CP sort of fight, then he can like sprint around, get a visor off, and it'll force them to change their position, even if he doesn't get kills, which hopefully he does. But yeah, because of that, you'll want to be helping your least mobile hero, which is your Junkrat. You know, Soldier's got sprint, Hanzo's got his leap. I guess Junkrat has his conk mine, but you know, that's sort of different. And then from here, it's probably just utilizing these spaces in particular. Like this is almost like a blind spot for the enemy team.
Cease your resistance.
They can't shoot that. Can't shoot it from here. They have to get into this spot, which is possible, but it is also very uncomfortable. Or maybe you might even want to put your Vongos here, if your Junkrat's got the space. But you definitely want to have your Junkrat supported here, you on main, and you want to push them out through main and left. Because this is such a good spot for Junkrat. Okay, yeah, so that's Orisa.